It's a lot about planting a lot of seeds. I always position it as like you're kind of tossing lines out in the ocean if you're on a boat, and you just got to keep tossing a ton of lines, and then eventually fish start biting. Too many people get discouraged on the direct to seller space because they get all hyped up to do a mail campaign, and they're like, I'm going to pull all these owners. All right, I'm going to do this mail campaign, and they send out 700 mailers, and they get one phone call, and and they tell them to F off, right? And that's the only phone call they get, and they just get discouraged, and they say direct to seller doesn't work. Well, it's like 7 to 12 touches before they're even like going to reach out to you. So you got to have some consistency in this direct to seller game.
Are you about to start a podcast or producing a podcast and tired of doing the editing yourself? We have produced over 1,000 daily shows, and the production team that I've created, they're now available to produce shows for you as well. We can do as little or as much as you need, from finding and communicating with guests, preparing introductions, to editing the audio and video. You will sound better, have a more professional presence, and be able to spend your time doing other valuable tasks on your business. Let me know you're interested by emailing me directly at whitney@lifebridgecapital.com.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Sam Rust. With me today is Chad King. Chad is the owner of several companies in different verticals, an accomplished investor and a business coach. Loves talking sales, investing, asset acquisitions, income stream building, and apartment buying. But his passion is buying and repositioning for-purpose apartment complexes that can be facilitate a force for good initiative, helping the communities and investors get back to great causes. Chad, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you today.
It's awesome to be here, Sam. Can't wait to dive into the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you graduated from Florida State, middle of the last decade, and then you went straight to Xerox. I know we were chit-chatting as we were getting to know each other a little bit in advance of the pod, but I love your perspective. Could you share with folks why you went to Xerox, selling copiers right out of college? That's not most people's dream job.
Yeah, understandably so. But, out of college, I had this hunger to be rich, and I hadn't caught the real estate bug quite yet, but definitely had that desire to make money. And I knew that salespeople could control their own destiny by controlling their own paychecks, and working for commission only didn't really scare me. So, getting into a job like that where you basically, eat what you kill, really was appealing to me because I wanted to make a lot of money and I didn't want to have any sort of ceiling or cap over my head. So going into selling copiers was kind of a path that I just jumped into.
And one of the interesting things, I've worked with several people over my career who've kind of taken that full commission job right out of college. They're hungry, they're driven, and you learn a lot of skills from cold calling, selling those types of products. I mean, it's not necessarily as much of a relational sale. Once somebody buys a copier, they don't tend to need another copier, at least for a little while. How do those skills transition to real estate? Or what did you learn in those couple of years that really has pushed you along the way?
Definitely how to handle rejection, how to handle no, how to push past, adversity, because in that specific racket, I mean, you're calling on people in the middle of the day when they're busy at their office, and you have to be able to approach them and still be likable, and it's pretty difficult to do. So being able to have emotional intelligence and understand, how other people perceive your situation. Like, I understood that I was interrupting someone in the middle of their day. So I would come right out and say it. Hey, I know I'm interrupting you in the middle of your day. I apologize. Like, going ahead and acknowledging that. So developing emotional intelligence, being able to move from no to no without losing momentum or motivation, I think is a tough. People get hear no, or they get a hit rejection and it just knocks them on their butt. But, you got to pick yourself up, put a smile back on your face, and just go to the next door. So those are a couple of the things that I think translate over to real estate, because you're going to hit a lot of adversity. It's a saturated space. There's a lot of rejection here. There's a lot of no's that you got to push past. So.
Yeah, I love that. How do you move from no to no? I have a background in sales as well, and it was a little bit of a longer sales cycle in industrial equipment, but that same philosophy. So many times you'd be interrupting people in their day. You're bringing something of value, but can you hit them at that right point in time? And there's a lot of rejection. And so being able to shrug that off is really important. And it also is important in real estate. So I'm curious how you made the jump from straight sales to moving into more of the wholesaling fix and flip game, which seems like that was kind of the next step in your career path.
I was the top salesman at the company my second year. So I was doing well, and I was in line for a promotion. And it was sort of, I got into this space where I was like, the corporate ladder was sort of being laid out for me. And it was like, hey, you're going to be sales manager and then you're a VP. And it was just like, it irked me really bad. I did not want to climb the corporate ladder. And it was that whole contribute to a 401k. This is the path, retire at 65. And it just, I'd been studying successful people while I was selling copiers. And like, I kept seeing this common theme, which was real estate. Like I kept seeing it, like all these wealthy, really, really wealthy people seem to have a lot of real estate in their portfolio. And I couldn't shake that bug. And like many people, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I started diving in, caught that bug. And then, once you catch it, and you start to understand how it works, you can't really go back. And I think most real estate entrepreneurs will agree, like, once you get that bug. So I just jumped in full time. I left Xerox cold turkey without any sort of plan. I don't recommend necessarily doing that, but I was in my mid-20s. So it was the time to do it. If you're young, take risks now. So I quit. I got into real estate full time and stumbled my way. Really in the beginning was rough, like got my license, didn't know what I wanted to do. And then found that niche in wholesaling and fixing and flipping, scaled that business up, which I'm sure we'll get to the part of where I get into apartments, but scaled that business up, ultimately making a lot of active income, and then transitioned over into, buying commercial real estate and holding.
Yeah. So you're doing both wholesaling and fix and flipping, or were you focused mainly on the wholesaling end?
Mainly on the wholesaling side of things, because I didn't have any money. Yeah. So, I didn't have any money to do the deals. So it was the wholesaling was kind of the niche that I found myself in. And then ultimately, being able to take some deals down with hard money and do some wholesales later on as the credibility grew. But yeah, that first 2 years was all wholesaling.
Yeah. And how did you end up in Nashville? So you go to college at Florida State, you're working for Xerox in the Miami area. What made you pick moving up north to Tennessee?
So my wife and I got married and we wanted to move somewhere where we didn't know anybody. So we're big believers, and you have to get out of your comfort zone, because comfort is a place where you'll die. So we had our family close, we had friends close, everything was really close, and we were super comfortable in South Florida. So we wanted to get really uncomfortable. And also geographically, the other reason is geographically, I studied the fact that it takes 8 hours to get out of Florida from being in Miami was a little ridiculous. And from a real estate perspective, wanting to own apartments, I wanted to be in a market that was conducive to investing in other markets. Because if you're in Miami, the only place you can invest is Miami. There's nowhere around it, right? You have to go a little north. But Nashville, the markets that we own assets in now are all within like a 3-hour drive. Like Louisville, Chattanooga, Huntsville, Bowling Green, they're all around us to get to in a car. And I noticed that I wanted to be in a place where I could get to other markets quickly to be able to own apartments. So those were the two reasons: getting uncomfortable and then being in a better real estate market. What
do you think drove you to be uncomfortable? I completely agree with that. And that's something that my wife and I talk about quite a bit, is how do we look for that next horizon that's going to get us out of our comfort zone? Because growth usually happens when you're under some sort of broad stress, and not very many people actively choose that path. A comfortable life in Miami, that sounds pretty good to a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. What was it about you and your wife that had you looking to the horizon?
Oh, man. I mean, that's how we're taught. We're taught through our upbringing is to avoid risk, like fly under the radar, don't do anything super risky. That's just kind of how our parents have told us to live, because they want to protect us. They want to protect us from danger. So people take that and they carry that with them through life, avoiding risk and avoiding discomfort. And, I was doing a lot of, reading books, and kept seeing this theme, though, that discomfort is the place to grow, like you said. So, I just bought into that mentality, and I removed a lot of limiting beliefs that I had in my mind, about, maybe things that were told to you when you're growing up, and kind of adopted a new set of beliefs. And that new set of beliefs was part of it was just, hey, you need to get uncomfortable, because that's where the growth is.
Yeah. So, it is interesting how much of our childhood is centered around failure avoidance. And the real failure is not attempting, right? And so many people just miss that element of life. They don't live to the fullest because they're not experiencing that rejection, that failure, and taking that, internalizing that, and growing through it. Just read The Obstacle is the Way, and love a lot of the concepts. I mean, it's a short little book. I would recommend it. But this idea that, hey, don't see obstacles as problems that hinder. They're opportunities to test your mettle, to grow, to gain skill sets that are needed to overcome those problems.
Yeah. Well, and look at the school system. I mean, the school system teaches from the ages of 5 to however long you're in school that failure is a bad thing. Like it teaches you to like failure is the worst thing in the world and that cooperation is cheating. Like you can't cooperate. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, failure is literally your path forward. Like you have to continuously fail, and cooperation is the only way you're going to get to your goals. Like partnerships, cooperating with others, doing deals with other people. That's the only way you're going to scale and grow. So I think there's a lot of things in the education system that also ingrain those beliefs into people that don't spit out entrepreneurs. They spit out employees because they teach those kinds of things too. So you got to really look and figure out what kind of beliefs are like maybe ingrained in the back of your mind that you need to like unbelieve. And that's the hardest part.
No. Is there any one thing that you found particularly hard to unbelieve? Is there one that stuck with you longer than most?
We always heard this money doesn't grow on trees. Everybody used to say that. And I feel like it's the most BS expression because it absolutely grows on trees. It's like the fakest thing in the world. And when you start to wrap your head around that concept that this paper that we all carry around and these digits in our bank account are not real, like they're not backed by anything. When you start to conceptualize that and then live your life with that belief, things start to change for you. You start to utilize that fake money to buy your time back and do other things with it, invest it. Like you don't hoard it or save it and think like you're saving anything because you're not. So that was the toughest one, I think. But once that one clicks, like it's like rocket fuel once you realize that money is fake.
Yeah.
That's probably my best one.
That's really interesting. A concept that really hit me is just stewardship. How can we be a good stewardship and to view money in its proper place? It is a resource, but it's not the goal. It's not the goal of life. And you want to use money to accomplish your life's goals, just like you want to use your time, your relationships, all those things are pointed at the goal that you have in life. And if you just view money as the end, man, you end up in bad situations and make bad decisions as a result.
Yeah. But it is, the other expression, money won't make you happy. I completely agree. The actual tangible money won't make you happy, but money is important. We live on an economic planet. It is super important. Money can, in fact, allow you to do things that make you happy. So it is important. I just wanted to say that because I think that expression also, money won't make you happy. I agree, but damn sure it can buy you your time back and you can do things that make you happy with that money.
Yeah. There's a lot of those axioms that I think were coined to kind of help cope with difficult circumstances. And if you can flip those and kind of look at them from the backside, you start to realize the inherent bias in some of those statements.
100%. Yeah. If you stand on the edge of the coin and you start looking at both sides, I mean, there's 3 sides to every coin and most people never stand on the edge. And, why am I being told, we talked about sales for a little bit, but asking the question, why, like, why am I being told this? Like, why is this narrative being spun this way? And looking at both sides and seeing kind of what the drivers are for why you're being told certain things and why those axioms are the way that they are. When you start asking those questions, you get a lot of answers that can really open up some doors for you in your life.
Yeah. And it's amazing how many people will not like the why question, right? They get defensive, they push back. A lot of people don't want to see people get to the edge, as it were.
Sure. It's because the answer scares them sometimes.
You realize that maybe one of your foundational truths that you built your life on was maybe not a foundational truth. I love the quote from Mark Twain. It's not what I don't know that gets me in trouble. It's what I know for sure that just ain't so.
Yep. That's a good one.
So you're wholesaling. You've got a lot of active income. I'm sure taxes are nipping at you. April 15th is not the funnest time of year. What was the impetus to get into multifamily, to scale bigger and change the business model?
Sure. Yeah. And I always had that in mind, even when I got into wholesaling, like I always knew that the end game was going to be apartments. I just, because that was part of the study. So getting in and making a lot of money is great. But when you're in a transactional business like that, where you're wholesaling or you're flipping, there has to be a means to an end, because you wake up, you do 200 deals one year, and then the next year you got to go out and do another 200 deals. Right. And it's like, when does that ever end? So taking that money, ultimately rolling it into multifamily apartments was absolutely the path. I had kind of already known that, but I needed to make that money first before you can start to buy those things. But then there was another limiting belief there that I'm sure we'll debunk, which is I could have got straight into apartments and done the syndications that I'm doing now and bought these complexes with other people's money. I just didn't know that I could do that in the beginning. I just somewhat ignorance getting into the space, like thinking that you needed money to buy these things. And, having money definitely helps. It's certainly a lot tougher without it, but ultimately you can, orchestrate an apartment complex deal with zero of your own capital. If you are trustworthy, you have integrity, you know what you're doing, and you have great partners around you. So,
yeah. So if you were to go back, would you go straight to apartments?
Man, I got some great experience, and I'm the type of guy that answers that question with I wouldn't change anything because everything led me to where I am. That's kind of how I would answer that question. But ultimately, if I could go back, I wouldn't have gone to college. So, I mean, like I wouldn't have even, I just wasted 4 years of my life. So, I mean, yeah, if I could go back, I would have gone right into it for sure, especially because I would have bought a lot more properties at a lower price per door than you could buy them now. So yeah, I definitely would have gotten into it.
Yeah. You're thankful you got in when you did,
Sure.
For people who are in the syndication game and have been buying apartments for a couple of years, but you look at some of those values, whether it's CoStar or Yardi or any of these other databases, it's like that was trading at that cap rate at that price per door. It's unbelievable.
Yep. The best time to buy real estate though is now. Always now.
Yep.
So, yep.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you're also, I imagine, pulling a lot from your sales background into negotiating with owners. Are you doing direct outreach to current owners of properties, trying to facilitate the unicorn off-market deal? How does that play out in your business?
So of the last year, in the last 2 years, we picked up 9 properties. 6 of them have been formal syndications. And of those 9, 7 of them have been direct to seller. Wow. So we like going direct to seller. And it's just, I like to be able to talk to an owner and figure out why he wants to sell this building and figure out, using that tactical empathy and that emotional intelligence to put myself in his perspective and see why he wants to sell. We've gotten some great owner financing terms on some of these deals. The direct to seller game is tough. It's very difficult. It's a gritty game. You have to have a lot of consistency. You have to have a lot of persistence, and you have to be able to talk to people and have the gift of the gab, because unlike, single family real estate, there's not much distress. So there's not like anybody fire selling these properties. They know the market's hot and they know they could list it with a broker. They know, so there's got to be a reason why, they would let it go off market. They also got to feel like they're getting a fair deal. And they also got to feel like the person sitting across from them is going to perform. They know, like, and trust that person. That comes into play a lot in the multifamily space. So having that sales background and being able to, ask great questions, figure out why that person sitting across from me even wants to sell or is entertaining selling, and then positioning my offer to accommodate what they're trying to accomplish. Like if it's avoiding taxes and they still like the passive income, they just don't want to deal with the property. Well, then I'm going to offer them an owner finance note. Those kinds of things have translated really well into like the buying these apartments.
What size of complexes are we talking here? Are we talking 400 units? Are we talking 20 units? Like what's the range of size that you guys are chasing?
Right now, my smallest apartment complex is 14 units and my largest one is 93.
Okay.
On the GP side. And I'm invested in a lot of LPs on a lot of bigger deals, 200 units plus. But on the GP side, under 100 units is typically where we find a lot of success in our direct to seller marketing efforts.
Yeah, we have focused primarily on 100 units and up. But my working theory, and I'm curious if you could confirm this, at least in your experience, is that brokers tend to focus on those larger transaction sizes. The owners tend to be a little bit more professional. It's a little bit larger. They're making a little bit more. And as a result, that kind of in between space, and I might scale down a little bit and say 10 to 70 units, 75 units or so is not as attractive to brokers. And so there's maybe more room for direct to owner marketing. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I mean, that 50 to 100, like we have a lot of assets between 50 and 100. And I think that space is out of the institutional level purview. So I'm not I was competing with a deal. It's 140 units here in Nashville. And the person I'm bidding against, I'm in a round of highest and best. And the person I'm bidding against puts $1 million hard day one. And I'm like, how am I supposed to compete with $1 million hard day one? Come on. So you can have success, 100 units plus, but you're ultimately going to have to go through that process, which is that highest and best. It's going to be, the call for offers. It's that broker process. And that's right now because we're at the peak of a market. That turns when the market turns and brokers start to call you back instead of you having to hound them. But when the market does turn, like I said, under 100 units is typically a space you could play that's out of that institutional purview, and you can have a little bit more a little bit less competition. To say there's no competition is crazy. There's just a little bit less of those bigger players.
And what does your funnel look like for pulling owners in? What does your outreach look like?
Yeah, so we do a combination of things. So we pull lists based on certain criterias, and then we'll do a cadence of mail, email, and text campaigns on an alternating basis, with language that's really kind of directed at building a relationship with these people. It's not like, hey, I'll close quick. It's more just building a relationship. This is who we are. This is what we do. If you're ever considering selling, please reach out, things like that. And then I'll be honest, man, I've sent mail. I've gotten a phone call from a piece of mail that I sent 2 years ago, to these apartment owners. So it's a lot about planting a lot of seeds. I always position it as like you're kind of tossing lines out in the ocean if you're on a boat, and you just got to keep tossing a ton of lines, and then eventually fish start biting. Too many people get discouraged on the direct to seller space because they get all hyped up to do a mail campaign, and they're like, I'm going to pull all these owners. All right, I'm going to do this mail campaign, and they send out 700 mailers. And they get one phone call and and they tell them to F off, right? And that's the only phone call they get. And they just get discouraged, and they say direct to seller doesn't work. Well, it's like 7 to 12 touches before they're even like going to reach out to you. So you got to have some consistency in this direct to seller game, Oh. But yeah, that's how we do it.
Have you mentioned owner financing. Have you done any like partnership type structures where you come in, you're the operator, maybe you infuse some capital and complete a value add program, but the owner stays on in some capacity to share in some of the upside as kind of an incentive to sell? Have you guys ever done anything like that?
Yeah, that's similar to like a master lease option. And I've made a couple of MLO offers. I've never done a deal like that. Most of my seller financing has been either they hold a first position, a primary note for a majority of the equity, or they hold a second position note on top of a loan that we get from a bank. Those are the only two structures that I've done. I've never done one with a partner like that.
Okay. Yeah, we're just trying to get creative. There's a lot of these complexes that are owned by people who maybe even built them, and they maybe self-manage them. There's tons of opportunity. Every time you drive by, it's just a little bit painful. It's like, could be a gem. But figuring out a way to unlock that value, and even if it takes sharing some of that upside, it's some avenues that we're exploring as we reach out direct to sellers or to owners, I guess, because they're not sellers yet.
Yeah. No, I mean, anything you can do to get the deal done for sure and help create a win-win scenario, you got to do it. Master lease options have, like I said, I've never completed one, so I can't really speak to it, but those are cool deals if you can get them done for sure.
Yeah. And you said your average time for response is 7 to 12 touches. Is that your main metric of success, is at least somebody coming back to you? Or how do you measure success and your costing on the outbound marketing side?
So, I mean, we do track our KPIs for sure. I don't want you to think we don't. We track them, but my measurement to success is appointments. So like, how many of these sellers can I actually meet with and talk to about their building? Either have a long phone conversation or meet with coffee, because I know that appointments will generate LOIs, and LOIs submitted is always and always will be the biggest driver of results in this space. So for anybody listening, if you have a problem with your deal flow and you're upset that you can't get contracts, I guarantee you it's because you're not submitting enough LOIs. And I tell all my students in our mastermind group, like, LOIs is the driver. And if you are not submitting enough LOIs, it is a signal that something is wrong up the chain, up the funnel. There's something wrong, right? You're not looking at enough deals, right? You're not walking enough properties. You're not calling enough brokers. You're not putting out any outbound marketing, because I know that if you've only submitted one LOI in the past 60 days, like, it takes 8 to 10 to get a contract. Like, you're a long ways from doing a deal. So that's my biggest driver and my biggest KPI. And I know I kind of took a tangent, but I think I don't worry too much about like response rate. I mean, I know what it is. I know what our response rate is, but I only care about LOIs submitted. And I do broker relationships. So I don't get me wrong. Like 50% of my activity is geared towards brokers, but I'm just finding that I'm like 15% below kind of what the price guidance is on a lot of these assets right now. So I'm hanging tight. I'm buying right and sitting tight.
Yeah. It has been fascinating, even just in the last 9 months, to watch valuations blow out in the markets that we're chasing. It seems like that is the story around the country. There's very few places that aren't being touched by this wave of appreciation that, 3 years ago, I was hearing people say, oh, we're in the 8th inning of this cycle. And turns out, from our perspective now, it's like you should have bought everything you could have, but you didn't know. You have to be prudent with your investors' cash. And valuation, we're selling several assets now because, man, we want to take some chips off the table and focus around our core assets.
Yeah, we are too. We got one that listed yesterday, and we've sold 2 in the past 12 months. So I have another few assets that I'm on the LP on that are selling for the exact same reason. It's like, my unit count has taken a big hit probably in the next 90 days, but it is what it is, right? I'm not after that number. I'm after, good assets that produce cash flow. And you do have to take chips off the table when you hit big wins like that.
Yeah. Money isn't everything, but when you can pull out and realize an exit that has a comma or 2 attached to it, you got to think long and hard before you say no.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. When you can sell something for twice as much as you paid for it 2 years later, like it's like, well, I kind of have to sell it.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter how good the cash flow is, especially in this environment. Well, let's get that redeployed and change our basis a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Cool.
You'd mentioned that you've read a lot. I'm curious if you'd have a book or 2 that you would recommend to folks who are looking to get into real estate or in real estate. Is there anything that comes to mind that's a standard go-to for you?
Obviously, like the standard answer is like, if you're getting into it, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but there's a lot of good books on like syndications. Like Matt Faircloth has a great book, Apartment Syndications. I think Vinny Chopra has a great book too on syndications. So you just got to, I don't know. All books are great. I read a lot of mindset business books too. So
what's your go-to in that category?
So anything, David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me is a great book. It's not for everybody, but Relentless by Tim Grover, like those types of books, the mentality of the high performers. If I look at my shelf, and then obviously from a sales aspect, Never Split the Difference is probably the best sales book I've ever read, followed by Sales EQ by Jeb Blunt. And then I would say, Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, or Flip the Script by Oren Klaff is another great sales one. I encourage everybody to tune up their sales game. I think everybody's in sales, whether you know it or not, and understanding the concepts and the basic principles of emotional intelligence, empathy, how to ask great questions, how to position yourself in a negotiation. If you're in a conversation with somebody and the desired outcome is something of anything, you're in a negotiation. And if you don't know you are, the other person likely does, and you're likely going to lose. So I don't know. And that's true with your spouse, with your kids, with any conversations you're having at the grocery store or multi-million-dollar real estate deals. It's the same. So those are some of the books I'd recommend for sure.
Yeah. As our economy evolves, as society changes, there's a lot of the hard skills, quote unquote, that are going away or being automated out. But sales is one of those that will always be there. Always be there. If you're good at sales, you can use that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be door-to-door selling encyclopedias or copiers, as the case may be. But that emotional intelligence that Chad's mentioned a couple of times is crucial, really, to living life well, being able to understand where people are coming from, empathize, and then work towards a common goal or a desired outcome that fits the needs of all parties.
100%. Couldn't have said it better.
Awesome. Well, Chad, we've really enjoyed having you on the show today. Final question. What's one thing that you would attribute your success most to that maybe our audience could glean?
Oh man, having good partners in your life. My wife, number one, my rock, my spouse for sure. And then having good partners in all my other areas and my other businesses. It's the ultimate way to scale and grow faster. It's the best way to, it's just having great, and you'll go through some bad partners, by the way. So like you'll have partnerships that don't work out, and that's really tough. Those are hard, but ultimately the ones that do, it makes it all worth it, because doing this racket when you feel like you're on an island, it almost makes it like not worth it. So that's what I would attribute to my success is great partnerships, great relationships with people. Excellent. Well, if folks want to find out more about you, learn what you're doing in the Tennessee area and surrounding states, where can they reach out to you, Chad? So a couple things here. So you can get me on Facebook at Chad King, or on Instagram at Mr. Chad King. It's just Mr. Chad King. And then I put together a little like giveaway just for y'all's audience for this. I have a mastermind group called 7-Figure Multifamily. And I did this challenge where I went into a new market in 1 week, in 5 days with 1 hour a day, submitted an LOI on an apartment complex by the end of the week. So I would teach people how to do it to try and remove limiting beliefs. And I'll send you the link. We'll put it in the show notes, but I believe it's 7-Figure Multifamily first offer challenge /chat or something. I'll get you the link for it. But if they want to just watch that video, we charge money for it. But for you guys and your listeners, if you want to see how to go from not having any relationships in a market to being able to submit an LOI on an apartment complex in 5 days, we'll give that challenge out. And then we have an event in June here in Nashville, a multifamily event. So go to multifamilyliveevent.com if you want to get more information about our live events.
Fantastic. Chad, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our audience for joining us on another episode of the Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Sam Rust, signing off.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.